welcome to the Go-to-Market RevTech edition of the Market Genius AI podcast. Today we are joined by Tarush Aggarwal. FiveX brings together best-in-class data tools for modern business users. Welcome on the pod.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you from your Dubai hotel. Thank you for for joining us. So let's dive in. I'd love to hear a little bit about what the elevator pitch or sales pitch is for FiveX.
We started FiveX 4 years ago, and the thesis is that the data space happens to be one of the most fragmented ecosystems. We have thousands of vendors and all sorts of different categories. A lot of people in the GTM world can't even keep up with the different categories, especially now that we have AI. This is kind of adding a whole new range of categories. So FiveX was originally built to be an all-in-one offering. The analogy we use is data vendors today are selling car parts. Imagine walking into a Honda showroom and instead of selling you a Civic, they sold you an engine and you had to build your own car. What we are very focused on is helping the business move very quickly by giving you an integrated all-in-one platform. That's kind of one persona, right? Which is very focused on the business side of things, on moving quicker. And we're also, built on open source technology. I think there's a big debate happening in the AI world, which is really who owns your data. With SAP and Salesforce, which are extremely widely used, it's becoming clear that they've taken the stance that they own your data, that you can't get your data out of SAP without paying them for it. On the other hand, you have some of the modern companies built on modern data warehouses, which talk about having your data owned by you. So the other point of what we really focus on is we're built on open source technologies. We can run in the cloud, we can run on your cloud, what we call private cloud, as well as we can run on-prem. So where security, compliance, data sovereignty are a big issue for regulated industries, finance, government, healthcare, that's another large area for us in giving these companies flexibility and being able to run our platform on top of their data instead of the other way around.
You mentioned you'd been helping large companies manage their data. Is that kind of where you got the idea to start this company 4 years ago? Like you were sick of using the tools available, or what was the reason for starting it?
I think very often in New York and San Francisco, we live, there's an assumption that every company is really taking advantage of data and every company is in the AI world today. But the reality is very different from that. AI and data are very much a San Francisco and New York, more Western tech first businesses. If you really look at traditional businesses, think about banking, manufacturing, retail, education, government, healthcare, anything which is not pure tech, right? Or like digital native, what we call, they're very far away from, investing. These companies have bought SAP in the last 10 years. They've bought Salesforce in the last 10 years. What they're now dealing with is different data sources, data silos, data quality issues. These businesses are very risk averse. They would buy technology based on what all of their competitors are buying, not on being bleeding edge, because a lot of them have gray collar workers. Technology is not their forte. So technology is seen as a risk function. We've focused a lot on either industries like this or functions. Like if you look at a GTM team, very often they might not have support from the global data team. That's not really the first priority. They're starting to want to go out and focus on, finance teams, GTM teams, revenue teams. So we're built for businesses or industries where technology historically hasn't been something which they had the resources or the appetite to go invest in directly. We wanted to go store data for, you know, folks outside the valley. That's actually the name of my blog, right? Outside the valley. That's where the idea came from.
That makes a lot of sense. I would argue that a lot of companies in San Francisco and New York do not have data and AI figured out either, but many companies and startups are trying to solve that. So you're kind of helping in an area where not as many companies or competitors are there.
I agree with that. There's a lot of companies that are not native data management companies or good grasp of how to manage this, but There's a reason for that. I think the overall adoption of new technologies is just lagging in general. I think we are, like you said, Tarush said we are having these projections in our head that if there's a new technology on the block, everybody's adopting, but that's not true. The human nature behind is also, hey, I'm going to look at it. I got to see how it goes. There's some research that was published by The Economist saying that 80% of British publicly traded companies were not even fully migrated to cloud. So that is very telling, right? I mean, Great Britain is not maybe the most innovative economy, but it's definitely not,
Behind the times, yeah.
behind us. So you can argue that there's still a way to go, and these are the kind of reasons. But also, if you're a publicly traded company, if you want to become a data first enterprise, that's an enterprise project, like really expensive thing you have to take care of, right? So yeah, I think these are the kind of reasons why a lot of companies. But you were right, a lot of companies are not.
Yeah.
They are not native to that.
If in the last 10 years, for a lot of these businesses, in many ways, this was a nice to have. Yeah, so what if you have reporting and anyone can answer questions? For most of the world, minus the Western world, like labor is cheap. Go throw an analyst at the problem, financial analyst, marketing analyst. Why would you spend $2 million and take on so much risk and not have any visibility of when this is going to end? These migration projects go on forever, and you kind of
Yep.
keep playing this game, right? So, but the issue, we kind of completely ended up here by accident, but we, you know, we're living at a time where this is now becoming the foundations for AI, because you can't throw people at AI. And whether you like it or not, and there's obviously a lot of buzz out there, but it is going to, you're not going to write that much code anymore yourself. You're not going to go build your first version of your web page yourself. You're not going to go build a dashboard to go figure out what was revenue last month and what's going up and down. This is going to become conversational in nature. But the reality is none of that AI stuff works unless your data is clean, because if you don't understand it, AI can't kind of figure it out, right? Because you ask a business, what's revenue? But that's such a loaded question. What does revenue mean? Is this sales revenue, which is based on order form signed? Is this financial revenue, which is money in your bank account? Is it marketing revenue, which is, some sort of conversion based on funnel? The investment in data is largely now is starting to become the exercise of sitting down and starting to answer some fundamental questions, which historically we've never paid attention to. This is really, what the difference is in the last 10 years, why many companies didn't really do it, but why all of them in the next 5 years have to do it.
What are the early signs for a company that something like FiveX might be a good solution for them? Like, where do you typically see companies coming to you, being interested in what you're selling, and what does that look like?
We look for symptoms of bigger underlying problems. The core one, which we're really focused on, is what we call data silos, data quality, or data trust. These are all different words for the same thing. And they really come from this idea that we're using more tools than ever before. 20, 30 years ago, we would probably use, Yahoo for like everything. And today, we have Slack and Zoom, but we get all of that for free because we use Google Apps, but we still pay someone else to do this. We're getting very obsessed with buying different tools which do one specific thing. What's the byproduct of that is all of your data is all over the place. And, you know, I know you have a lot of marketers over here. When Facebook shows you a number, they're showing it to you from the Facebook context. Google is showing you a number from a Google context. You can't look at these apples to apples because they all are kind of doing it in their own way. You get to this point where you want to start objectively go put Facebook ads and Google ads and a third organic ad platform and really see what's actually happening. What should we do more of? What should we do less of? And at this point, you want to go consolidate your data, get an overall picture of it. You want to start to give different teams which are siloed. A marketing team has got very different information from a sales team. They might be using different tools. you want to bring everyone into the same conversation, you start to pay a tax, which is the communication tax, because people are not on the same page. And these are some of the symptoms which, when you start to see, this is the right time to start thinking about data. Now, when you think about data, I would really understand where you are, right? If you're the type of business which is not a technology savvy business, you have no business trying to go to Databricks and to go hire a data engineer to go figure it out, because you can have the best tools, but if you don't have the expertise and the know-how and the DNA to go use them correct, banks have the best tools ever. Minus the 2, 3, 4, minus Capital One Bank. Like, when is your, you know, Wells Fargo is not known to be, a great sort of data business. They have access to all of the tools you can ever imagine. So when a company like FiveX becomes very relevant is, four types of businesses that need the hand holding to basically go um, from the problem statement to the actual solution and implementation.
Before we dive into the demo, I'm very excited to see the product. What type of ROI are you talking to your customers about? So they implement FiveX, they get it up and running. What is the critical metrics that you're telling them to look at that this is being impactful?
The data world has always historically been way more challenging to measure ROI, because measuring the value of decision support is sort of extremely challenging, right? Like, you can't put a price on, hey, it took me a week to analyze to actually go get this data, and now I can go do this in a day. So it's unlike, so data is not there's no first order consequences from that perspective. Now that we have AI, things are very different, right? Because we are now starting to see AI applications being built on your data. So if you have an inventory solution, anyone working in e-commerce, retail, we're able to go directly run an AI application on your inventory, which we'll go train this for the last 2 years of data from T minus 24 to T minus 6, and it's going to show you what it would have done different on your inventory from what you did. So preventing stock out problems, over capitalization of stock, over stocking is sort of capital, it's warehousing, and we can actually go compute the ROI. So the a lot, traditional ROI metrics, I'm very excited, are now coming towards the data world, and that's going to come because of AI applications. But historically, when we measured ROI, what is, in terms of how much money you're spending, how does a solution like FiveX compare to if you were to go do this yourself? When you think about it from that perspective, you know, roughly speaking, about 20% of your data team, they spend time on managing infrastructure and building tools and putting them together and that entire maintenance aspect of it. When you use an all-in-one platform like FiveX, that number typically goes to zero. Again, buying an integrated solutions versus buying 5 solutions, they tend to be about 30% cheaper. So all in all, when you look at, the ROI of your people, of your data stack, a solution like ours compared to something like in-house would be between 30 to 40% cheaper. So that's kind of how we stack up against doing this yourself.
And that's like the foundational ROI. And you were kind of touching on there's all kinds of ROI benefits and decisions you're making and how you prepare that are much harder to tie to the data being accurate. So that makes a lot of sense.
The unfortunate answer, and some people won't like this, the ROI of investing in some parts of data, and this is not like a dramatic answer, but in some of the foundational pieces of this, the ROI is having a business in 5 years.
I agree with this. I think the ROI is a hard thing to accept across the company from the concept perspective, because everyone is trying to simplify this and say, oh, this is a 10% of my time. Everybody's talking right now about AI and the 20% of efficiency that every meta engineer is having. And for the same reason, 20% of people getting laid off. I mean, that's lame. And I know the meta is not a great example because they are very data savvy. But where I'm going with this, I think the biggest ROI you're getting is how the mindset is shifting in a company. And even if you can qualify this as something that is as a number or quantify in the form of dollars, you still see the quality of decisions making to change, right? So sometimes it's not something you need to look at as a number. It's just the quality of those conversations that will give you a good ROI. You know what I mean? Because we will just be almost everywhere.
Yeah.
Arguably, you can quantify everything, but I don't think that's where the conversation should start. Which, by the way, talking about the conversation and ROI, that's a great segue to the demo.
This is our architecture page. Everything starts off with architecture. On the left-hand side, we have data sources. Now, your average early to mid-sized business today has 10 to 20 different data sources. This is from your backend databases, Facebook ads, Google ads, Salesforce, Google Sheets, QuickBooks, Xero, Zendesk. You get the picture. SAP. So we're able to pull this data. Today, we support over 600 different data sources out of the box. We're able to pull it into a data warehouse. If a company is already on a cloud, if you're on AWS, you might want to use Redshift. If you're on GCP, you might want to use BigQuery. You might be on Snowflake. You might be on a Databricks. We work on top of all of them. If you don't have one, you could go get one from FiveX. So we take care of that abstraction for you. But once we pull your data, we want to put it into a data warehouse. This is your single source of truth. This is where you have data from all of your different systems. Now, once it's over there, we want to run a data modeling layer. This is where you clean your data, you structure it, you work backwards from what are the questions you're trying to answer, and you structure your metrics accordingly. We have an orchestration layer. This is where you orchestrate your jobs. You might have dependencies, like this job runs on top of this, and if this fails, this is what you do. We have something called semantic layer, which is very interesting. Semantic layer really is the bridge between data and AI. Semantic layer is where you define what a business metric is. I spoke about the 3 different definitions of revenue. This is where you put the definition. So when you go do this, number one, all of your insights, your BI tool, your analytics, your AI applications, they all read from your semantic layer. So, if I build a dashboard on a metric in semantic layer, and then in the future, if that metric changes, I just need to change it in semantic layer. Whereas if you don't have a semantic layer, you tend to add the application logic in every dashboard. Your analysts need to know this. Your AI apps need to know this. And then you have what you call a fan out problem. If you change the logic one time, you got to change it many times. So semantic layer consolidates this. But the other big advantage is it's the gateway to AI. So we just launched a new product, which is called Conversational AI. And off the bat, it works with semantic layer. So if there's any metric you've defined in semantic layer, you'll simply be able to just ask a question and go answer that question inside conversational AI. This is the overall architecture. Would love to, go into how do you use this on a day-to-day basis. So you go into the ingestion tab. We support today over 600 different connectors out of the box. This is anything you can think of. If you don't have a connector, we can go build a custom one for you. When you have a connector, you can go inside of it. HubSpot, very, very sort of popular inside GTM teams. I can see all of the different objects inside. I can go into an object. I can see exactly which fields are inside. I can sync every 1 minute. So I can bring this down to near real time. So having all of the data from all of your different sources go directly into your warehouse. Once it's in your warehouse, we give you enterprise grade modeling. So FiveX, as I mentioned earlier, we built a lot on open source. We use 9 open source technologies under the hood. The modeling layer is running something called DBT, which has become the de facto way of data modeling. We use SQL and Python under the hood. This gives you things like data lineage out of the box. So you're actually able to understand as you build scripts, the actual dependencies. Where is the data flowing? This might take a second to load, but what we're seeing over here is this is going from all of our different ad campaigns, from Google ads, from Facebook ads, from LinkedIn ads, all the way to a single table called marketing spend, which, as you can guess, is probably going to have all of our marketing spend across the entire company in a single place. When we want to schedule these, we're able to build pretty complicated DAGs. What jobs depend on each other? How does it go? I can go into a single job. I can choose to go run this node only. I can run it upstream. I can run it downstream. So it starts to be aware of the metadata. It starts to be aware of dependencies up and downstream. As I mentioned earlier, semantic layer is really the bridge between data and AI. This is where I define my metric. So what's an account? What's an opportunity? What's a user? What's a lead? What are my different marketing channels? I'm able to go define these. If I look at the actual definition, I'm define my marketing channels. These are my Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, undefined. These are the marketing channels which I have. This is where I'm actually going and sort of defining this. And so now marketing channel is actually becoming a metric in FiveX, which my BI tools, which my analysts, which my AI tools can all read. So you can go into a BI layer. Very often companies have a preference of a BI tool. In case you don't, we ship one with FiveX. I can actually go in, and all of these metrics are actually just coming from my semantic layer. So if I go change a metric, it's in semantic layer, it's going to change in my dashboard, and it's going to change in an analysis which my analyst gives me, and it's going to go change in some of the AI apps which I have downstream. We've just shipped a new product called Conversational AI. It works directly on top of semantic layer. Unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to demo this right now. This is still in sort of beta mode. But the idea being is you'll just be able to ask a question. And if it's any metric inside the semantic layer, it's just going to answer it directly for you. We also have a concept of data and AI apps. These applications are built directly in FiveX. So, when we go inside our IDE, our modeling layer, I can, in just a few lines of code, I am building an application. And what I can actually do is have this application render directly over here. This allows businesses to build applications for things like data entry. This is an application which takes an LLM and puts it on top of our marketing data. I've just taken my entire marketing data and put an LLM on top of this and given you a conversational AI marketing bot. And I've sort of gone and done this in, under 300 lines of code.
I think it's still relevant because you might not want to give the marketing team access to all of this, but you might want to give them an application so that they stop asking you random questions as a data analyst and can go source it themselves.
Yeah, we have role-based access control, right? So you can define a role and just give the marketing team access to that. And all of this is fundamentally going to use your access control. So let's say you have different access from a coworker of yours. If you both ask the same question, it's going to actually go give you each only what you are allowed to see.
Yeah, it's an incredible amount of integrations that you've built. How did you tackle that? I mean, I'm assuming from the beginning you knew this was going to be a really important thing to build, but how are you able to add them so quickly?
So a few different concepts, right? Like number one, we focus a lot with traditional industries or with functions in the business which are sort of typically not very tech savvy. So data integrations becomes the number one sort of pain point. It's super critical. This is an example of a data management app. So very often, businesses are using Excel and spreadsheets, and that's the probably the biggest BI tool in a business. A tool like this is able to give us any table inside the data warehouse, and it gives us the ability to make changes directly on the table. This is very popular in things like workflow management and automation type use cases. Take a lot of the Excel type use cases. I can go upload a CSV, but now this is getting persisted into the data warehouse. I can build BI dashboards on top of it. And if I ever need to change data, you can't change data inside BI tools today. This gives you an interface. This is just an application sort of to go manage your data. But over here, I can make any sort of changes I want and persist them back into the database. This is just an example of what some of the applications which our customers find very useful.
I'm finding this absolutely fascinating that you could create something like this that is giving you the ability to update so many things almost simultaneously, right? And so let me run this through an example and you can tell me if I'm wrong. But let's say I'm trying to set up a renewal forecast process in my post-sale team. And I have, of course, two big chunks of data. It's one is CRM of the renewal opportunities, and then I have a lot of data related to product usage, right, or adoption. So these two are critical to flag anything that is a risk in my renewal process, right? So these opportunities that, of course, are likely to churn or they have a risk of churning. I have ability with your tool to have some conversation almost with the data itself through the semantic model to define the thresholds for that. And that will be a scoring.
So we have, some what we call market ready solutions, which are applications which we have pre-built, which run on top of our platform. And we're able to go into a company. The way to think about these are 50% custom, 50% pre-built. So, what you're talking about is something like a churn model or demand forecasting. So, when a company wants to use us, we're selling to a marketing team, we very often start with our churn model and demand forecasting. And we are able to start with this to go pull in their data from their data sets, deploy our applications, just like we have over here, and go deploy this for a customer. So, they would have an application over here which talks about churn, and it's got a list of all of their customers and why we believe it's going to churn and what's a confidence score for each of them. This is not sort of cookie cutter, right? This is on top of their data on their data warehouse. So this is, I think you were spot on in what a really good application of data and AI apps is today.
I think the semantic layer is solving a lot of the typical problems because my experience working with individuals at the different level, they bring in their own experiences and their own perception of the problem. That is often happening in almost any organization. The problem with that is that when you try and solve this problem in a company that is maybe 50 employees versus 500 or 5,000 employees, that's going to have all the flavors in it, right? And I think with your tool, you have ability to have that conversation, help to educate that individual. I think you're trying to solve this with the tools that are for a, sandbox like play versus what we have in the real construction. We're using a lot of different materials here. And that is additional value. I'm literally working with my customers right now, and then that's the biggest challenge. I almost lacking the tool that can help me to benchmark this and bring some context for why I think I'm driving them in that direction. And semantic layer is like just perfect.
Yeah, I know it really becomes the bridge from the data and numbers world into a business. What semantic layer, if you really think about it, is it's wrapping some metrics with some context around it. And when you do this exercise, you start making it sort of context aware. So if I ask a chatbot, what is revenue? I actually wanted to say, hey, I have two different types of revenue, sales revenue and financial revenue. And which one are you referring to? Or when you ask a question, what was sales by region? If I haven't defined region, I don't want ChatGPT going and figuring out that, we're going to loop in these states in Western America and this is, West and East. I want to kind of go tell you is, hey, I don't understand your, region. We haven't defined this in the past. Push this button and I'll flag the data team and they can go define region because I don't want to give you I don't want to give you an answer which is inaccurate. So, there's a lot of Gen AI hype, and Gen AI is going to have massive implications. Document search, like going and training a model on all of my Slack conversations and then asking it what is revenue. If I do that 10 times, it's likely going to give me 10 different answers because it's non-deterministic. Now, I can't afford that when when an executive is asking what was last month's revenue and what channels contributed on it and which channels are going down, that has to be extremely accurate. So we can go do a conversational product, but unlike different AI sort of products which have different levels of accuracy, our conversational AI product had to be over 95% accurate on day one. And if you ask a question 10 times, it has to give you the same answer 10 times.
Yeah, it's adding the guardrails to AI. It's interesting because, data is precise, or that is the point of it, is it's deterministic and precise. AI and, machine learning is really good at processing data, but AI, ChatGPT or whatever, is not precise. So, like, how do you marry these two things so that they work together? And the semantic layer does it. We're going through a process of redefining our semantic layer, which I think is great where I work. But it's like, okay, well, then we have to go update all those dashboards. So that's the kind of the magic of having it within the system like that.
I have a little bit provocative question for you.
Finally,
While you were presenting, yeah, are you trying to replace all these high skilled data analysts with a lot of other people that maybe are kept away from it, kept away from the kind of data analysis or data science at this point? Is that the goal?
technology companies or companies that want to go make the investments into data and AI will go hire a bunch of data engineers, data analysts, data scientists. We don't necessarily want to sell to them because in a way, like they are going to pick the tool which they used in their last company. A new tool comes out, there's FOMO. In a way, it's their job to kind of go try out new tools to bring in complexity. It's like lawyers, right? When companies have lawyers and you go send them a contract, if the lawyers don't find something, what is their job besides that, right? Like they like in many ways their job is to go find like issues which they can then go fix, right? So in the same way, like we believe that a lot of tech first companies will go build their own data platform. That's why they're going to ask for 500 different people headcount and go set those things up. Not really our customers. The companies we sell to are going to be the companies we sell to will likely go buy Microsoft Fabric because they have a relationship with Microsoft. Microsoft sells them on an all-in-one platform. The reality is it's nowhere there yet. They market it as an all-in-one solution. What we're saying is, look, here's 7 or 8 different open source technologies. So there's no lock-in. These are the best in breed technologies underneath the hood. We're wrapping it up and giving it to you, and we can go deploy this on your Azure. So the companies we sell to are likely not going to have the same, either they're not going to have the people, or even if they have data scientists and data engineers, they're not going to be the same persona of data engineers and data analysts a tech savvy company is going to ask for, which is going to be, engineers that are hanging out at Snowflake Summit and they're going and talking about the sort of newest tools in the market. Very different persona from like 60 to 70% of businesses in the world who don't know what Snowflake is today.
Are you, in terms of customer adoption today, is it primarily enterprise that you're seeing adopt it?
When we talk about data security, the advantage we have, no one else can do on-prem. So, we spend a lot of time talking to banks or healthcare, or, we just got HIPAA. Now I live in Dubai, the sort of governments are very interesting sort of use cases for us. So we focus on enterprise where security and privacy and data is very important and mission critical. So that's where we do enterprise. We also focus on a lot of business teams. This could be GTM teams, finance teams, consumer facing products who care a lot about customer 360 and churn and all of the growth related stuff. So over there, we work with mid-sized, earlier stage businesses as well.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a leading question because you talk about tech companies and when you mentioned Meta before, like, yeah, they're going to go build this themselves. But if you're a mid-market tech company, you can't have 500 resources doing this. And so I actually think there's a big play in tech where, our data analysts would prefer to be focusing on the outcomes of the data, but they're spending a lot of time focusing on getting the data to the place it needs to be. And I think there's an opportunity there as well.
It's only a real opportunity if there's a burning problem in the organization. And broken gets fixed, but sort of shitty lasts forever, right? So if it's not ideal, but it's
Good
if
enough.
it's that's the worst problem to ever have because it's never gonna get better. But if it's broken, then that's when you have an opportunity of saying this is a better way of doing things.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to like businesses that want to be around in 5 years. I think it's really important to get your data right if you want to continue to grow and thrive.
We sort of saw this like, there were businesses 15, 20 years ago when Google was the new kid on the block and said, if you don't build a website, you're not going to exist in 15 years. And many of those companies didn't build websites, and most of them probably don't exist today. The difference with this race is it's not going to be 15 years, it's going to be 5 years. But sort of none of this is new. We've seen this playbook happen 10 times. I'm 35 years old and I've seen this happen. Like there was a company called BlackBerry, and before that there was a company called Yahoo, and like these companies don't exist now.
It's shocking to think that some people who might listen to this might not know who BlackBerry is, but it was so ever present. Yeah.
Yeah, or Nokia, right? For the same reason.
Yes, yes.
Although they do exist, they just exist in a different form.
They sell cell phone
Um,
towers now, right? They build technology for, like, my CFO was the ex-CFO of Nokia Asia. But, in his 10, 15 years over there is when he really saw the transition. Like, they're in a very different space right now.
Yeah, they are. They are. This is a completely different company. So, I think what we saw is like the multiple integrations. We saw like how you manage the workflow and how you can create these effective outputs for the team so that they can have a better readout. What would be your recommendation for the teams and the companies to ensure the data is reliable and also has some level of transparency? How to build this? Because, you know, often we are being accused, okay, well, you're showing me this cool tool, but you don't tell me how to prepare my company, how to set this stage so that I can be successful while I'm implementing.
Yeah, we also run a full service data consultancy on top of our platform. So 50% of our customers are completely hands off, take care of this for us. We want to go start at the metrics piece, right? So that's always an option. But in terms of the blueprint of how we think about this is go start with 50 metrics, right? Like go start with 50 different metrics, which are really, really important to you. Go list them out and work backwards. Now, in order to compute these metrics, where would the data come from? Probably about 15, 20 of them are not tracked today. Great. This is an opportunity to start to track them. And then it's going to force you to do a simple exercise, which is how do you define a metric? Because if you say what was revenue last month, that doesn't mean anything, right? Like the word revenue explicitly doesn't mean something. It's essentially, it has to have a context of what does revenue mean for your business. So it's going to force you to define how you want to define some things, and you're going to work backwards from it. You can use a tool like FiveX. You could, a lot of companies might just go to Power BI and go plug their SAP data onto Power BI or go plug the zero onto Power BI. There are a lot of limitations to that approach because you're building all of your application logic in Power BI. You can't use this outside of this. So you're taking a decision of, how you want to do it. But you could go take the fast approach of just buying a BI tool and going and plugging it on top of your data. You could do it in the 5x approach, which is you have the foundation and you can, build on top of it. But you would use the same approach. Go start with a small list of metrics and work backwards and go build those out. What will happen on day one when you see those metrics is you're going to see that and you're going to ask more questions. That's what data does. When every single business in the world is using data, even if they don't look at any numbers, because you ask a founder what was revenue and they would know it on the back of their head. And from that number, they'll want to know something else. They'd be like, great, our revenue was $200 million. What percentage of it came from this new product? What percentage came from the old product? So all data gives you is better questions. And what do better questions give you? A better understanding of your business. And very often it changes. Actually, this wasn't the right metric to look at. Let's go look at this one instead. That's a thesis. So What data is giving you is better questions, which lead to better theses, which help you better understand the business. That's what the cycle is all about. It's not about looking at the same numbers on a screen. Those dashboards, BI dashboards are not going to go away. Executive dashboard, operational dashboards, how many customer success tickets, BI is great for that. But 80% of these questions are going to become conversational in nature. Once I know what my number is, when I ask the question, what percent of it came from Facebook? Or I got 100 customers from Facebook, what percentage of those customers were still with us 1 year later? I call this sort of day two analytics, right? Like post the dashboard. But day two analytics is very much going to become conversational in nature. And you don't need to worry about that right now. If you were just getting started, I would still tell you to go say the same thing. Go figure out your first core list of metrics, work backwards, and build them on a dashboard, and you're off to the races. You've taken part in the first step of the process, and now you're going to ask better questions.
I love the approach because you really try and say that, hey, progress over perfection, and the process will smooth this out over time. So I'm always in that position. But there's also a flip side of this coin, right? Like there's a one thing when the leader really knows what they want, what they think they're aiming at from these metrics perspective. But there's a whole resistance behind the organization they manage, right? So if you're a COO, you're a CFO, you're very likely in a traditional company, you are Excel heavy, you're going to have multiple spreadsheets, you're going to have a reporting that is out of sync because people pulling your data at a different schedule, different time. The decision making is becoming more of the judgment than really a data readout. What would be your recommendation for these leaders to do before they implement or while they implementing systems like yours?
The solution which I gave, which is going and starting with a list of metrics, there are only two reasons why a company wouldn't want to do that. Number one, they don't want to sit down and go define what those metrics are. And they can happily go give a list of metrics to people. Nothing will ever happen because they haven't defined them. And they're happy to play in that game of being in the unknown because they don't want to sit down and define what those are. And number two is they don't want to see those numbers because those numbers are not going to tell a good story. These are the only two reasons from experience why this exercise becomes hard to do. If you don't have the actual clarity on what the metrics, what the definition should actually be, you're going to go around in circles, going to kind of every department and pointing fingers because you just haven't sat down and gone and done that exercise. But why this is not about the sort of first 25 metrics which you do. That's a byproduct. What this really is the most important exercise, which is sitting down and defining what your metrics actually are. Because that becomes a language in the company. And bringing everyone to speak the same language is not something companies are ready for all the time. They're leaders in companies who like hiding behind uncertainty. Like marketing isn't doing its job. What is marketing's job? Like, what is a qualified lead? Let's agree on a definition so that we can later come back and measure it. Like, a lot of sales leaders wouldn't want to do that. They can say they want to do it, but let's get actual granular. What does this mean? How do I track this? That's the exercise which this is going to force you to do.
I agree with this, and I think there's a underlying reason why a lot of these leaders don't want to do it because they're afraid of losing a job. Arguably, if you are not getting into these tough conversations, I would question your leadership abilities. But of course, this is a broader conversation about how the board is shaping your comments are right. I think the pressure is part of the game. Why you're getting paid so much as an executive, right? There's no free ride here, right? You are paid because you deliver. And if you're not, what comes next. And there are consequences of this because you're taking responsibility for your department and the entire company, right? It's not about you at that point. It's really about the organization. So the things you mentioned, I think they should become a part of the fabric of the leadership that trickles down through the layers of the organizational management, and they need to internalize this as a kind of priority on how they measure their success. Right? It's a typical waterfall like metric setting process, but I think if you narrow this down to a few and then you support this with the infrastructure that can easily connect these layers with the data and see how these teams really contribute, that's where you have a synergy, right? Because in the past, a lot of large companies, and I'm speaking through my experiences working in the large publicly traded company, the goals were clear. I think, but there was no reporting that was supporting that, and we were ending up in Excel spreadsheets and multiple other shit that you don't want to do. But I want to ask you a different question. I mean, the platforms like yours, the AI in general, that can enable a lot of these companies with the data that they gather or collect and maybe not use to the full extent. Do you think that there is a more fundamental change on the jobs that didn't exist before, but they will exist in the future? And I want to be a little bit more positive here because most of the comments around the AI are doom and gloom, taking jobs, taking jobs. But I want to focus on actually what is ahead, what is the more positive coming out of it, and also how platforms like your enable market to produce these new skills that are being put in the new jobs essentially didn't exist before. Do you have a point of view on this?
When we talk about AI, there are two types of AI, right? There's traditional machine learning data science, which are an inventory solution would work on, traditional AI, right? Understanding your patterns of usage and sort of going and doing that. We've been doing that for a long time before Gen AI came. A lot of the AI applications which we're building are using a lot of traditional data science techniques. Now there's sort of Gen AI, which is non-deterministic, which is largely, I believe, which is going to go into the foundational models, right? So even our conversational AI bot, it's very accurate. It works on top of semantic layer, but it's just going to be an MCP server, which you plug back into your ChatGPT. We don't expect people to use it in FiveX. It's going to tie back into. So the question becomes, what was revenue last month? And what are 5 things I can do to improve it? What was revenue last month comes from FiveX, but 5 things to do to improve it, that's when ChatGPT takes over and goes into full GPT mode, right? But that's multiple agents kind of working together. So that's how platforms like us play into the AI side of things. When it comes to traditional data science, there's no GPT for that, and there wouldn't be because that's more, that's more statistical. And there are a bunch of applications like churn prediction, inventory, smart CFO, which we'll do around, there's more like workflow automation, which we'll do. So just want to kind of separate out the two pieces to this and how they each play out. The sort of second question you asked me is more philosophical, right? Like I believe that, you're not, I believe that the, the top 20-30% of people are going to have, it's just like education, right? Like, or just like the news, you know, when the internet came out, like a lot of, your average publishers didn't really matter, but the New York Times is still okay. I believe that in your top 10%, your top 20-30% of marketers, of data engineers, of data scientists are going to be great. They're probably going to go work for a consultancy, which is really good at solving that problem because it becomes harder and harder for regular businesses to go justify that. Like regular businesses today don't need a lawyer, but you need a law firm. So we're going to see other functions also, the sort of fractional type roles or the sort of consultancy type roles move into sort of specialist organizations who can do an incredibly good job at your problem. And we're going to see like a lot of I'm talking about small to medium sized businesses are going to do a lot more, and even large businesses to an extent are going to do a lot more working with specialized agencies. Earlier, you had 2 types of businesses, right? Platform businesses or software businesses, which would do 80% of the work, And you have services businesses which charge 5 times more, which would do the last mile or implement on top of the platform. In the future, you're not going to have either of these. You're going to have personalized software. So you're going to have software companies using AI able to build you a more custom product, but go own the output. It's going to be more expensive than SaaS and it's going to be cheaper than pure consulting. But this is going to be the new middle way of like going and solving the problem without software plus people. And a lot of the best people are going to be working at these companies, which are able to go just solve the problem with both the software as well as the people to go drive the outcomes. So I think I look at that as a net positive.
The simplest way is like you talked about, this is how I think about it. Like, yeah, ChatGPT will tell you the 5 ways to improve that, but you probably need people to go do those 5 things, or at least 3 of those things, right? And like, you're going to have strategic people that can go and execute things to a degree that's efficient. It is a big change. Like, there's a lot of people who are average working at companies or below average working at companies, and we have to figure out what happens to those people that aren't super strategic or aren't in the top 10.
What about the millions of like people who work at like the big banks in the world who works at these companies? They're waking up to the fact that these companies don't really care that much about them. And that illusion of stability, which is why they had those jobs in the first place, is gone. I think a lot of these people, though uncomfortable, are like future founders and people who want to go build a mom and pop business to go do like something which they're passionate about. And I think a lot of there's going to be a exponentially lot more businesses, and businesses don't mean technology, but a business could be, you know you'll see a lot of stuff in like mental wellness space. You'll see a lot of stuff moving away from big urban cities back into small towns and villages. And I think a lot of people are going to be happy in those ecosystems and building small businesses and focused on just the things which they need to go focus on.
And even when you talk about SaaS and building more custom solutions, there might be more of those middleware companies that are really good at doing a specific thing.
Yeah.
I want to chat a little bit about where FiveX is heading from like a product roadmap perspective. What do you see as the next big opportunity for FiveX over the next year or two from a product perspective?
I think we're really liking the focus on the privacy, data sovereignty, sort of security type use cases. We're living in a time where I believe we're going to see a reverse migration from cloud. Companies will have cloud, but cloud gets 2x as expensive every year. The cost of cloud, like Amazon credit costs $2, whatever that costs, right? Or 0.2 per EC2 instance per hour. That's the same every year. But the cost of compute becomes half, right? So you're getting the same amount of compute for the same price every year when the actual market is halving. So cloud gets 2x more expensive year on year. It's very, very expensive. So we're going to see a lot of companies move off cloud, and data sovereignty in the world of AI becomes way more important. So we really like the idea of focusing on, you know, on businesses who have really high privacy, security, data sovereignty. And we're not going to go compete with the Snowflakes and the Databricks, and we're not a 100,000 employee sort of company. We're going to focus on the use cases where there's real value, where, we have deep expertise in what we do. So businesses which need us, they want us to come and go do this holistically. And then sort of secondly, where use cases which no one else can do because it deals with on-prem data or highly sort of secure environments. So these are the two areas which we're really going to go focus. I think it's been a big change, right? From trying to kind of compete with where the data space is going to now being like, let's just go do what we really love doing in two areas which make us really unique.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and the whole on-prem versus I mean, the last 15 years, all you heard about was cloud, cloud, cloud. Get it? You need to be in the cloud. And more new companies are building on-prem because it's so expensive. So that's a fascinating phenomenon that's popped up that you guys have been able to take advantage of. I'd love to hear about one or two. I mean, you obviously partner with a ton of companies, but I'd love to hear about one or two companies that you're really excited about, whether that's in the data space or in AI or anything.
I love a company called Julius.ai in the data space. They have created an analyst. You upload a data set and you just start asking questions. We sort of like them a lot. We've tried to email them before. They haven't replied to our emails. We would love to bring them onto our platform. We think they're doing a phenomenal job. That's one. I really like Glean a lot. And for the use cases of, we focus on the data reporting pieces. Glean focuses on sort of document search, right? Going through your Salesforce and your Slack and your emails and consolidating information on that. I think that is going to be the single boost to productivity in any generation and in any time. Because the information is there, removing the information access layer. So, no one, companies care about productivity, but it's again more of like, okay, great, productivity goes up 10%. How much is that worth? It's a beautiful sales pitch. In reality, it never meant anything. But I think these guys really have an opportunity of being able to prove a 50% company with Glean and a 50% company without Glean, and I'm talking about Glean, but I mean anyone solving in that category,
Yeah.
and Glean might be the biggest. I think that's just for the first time, it's a very exciting space, and it's going to also bring up issues around who owns your data, because Slack just told Glean that they can't use that data, and that's going to, you know, cause disruption in the next wave of companies, because this is also the beginning of the Salesforces and the SAPs getting disrupted because they don't play well with others.
Yeah, does Discord or someone else come in and eat Slack's lunch to a degree? Yeah, I think Glean should come up with a product that shows how much time someone spends searching in a Google Drive and then show how much time is wasted across their whole company because it's a lot.
You know, in some cases, there's some products which just speak for themselves in a way that you don't even have to go demonstrate this. What was the world before Slack? Slack doesn't say that before Slack, this is how much time it took. There is Slack. And I think there's some products which, when come out, you can't imagine a way of doing stuff without them. They're probably early on over there, but the opportunity which they have, I think, is massive.
Agreed. Agreed. You've given us a lot of great tips today, but do you have a top 3 tips to leave us with?
Um, I can speak about our industry, like, anyone looking to go do this, start simple. 80% of value comes from getting started, especially the framework which we shared about the metrics. Be aware of cost. Like, complexity does not mean more advanced. Actually, probably the opposite. And I also do this at the right time, right? Like, doing this too early, being data driven for the sake of it doesn't mean anything. When there's a real problem statement where data is sort of siloed, and you're hearing complaint, you don't have to measure how successful some of these things are, but if the symptoms of fragmentation and data quality are sort of coming up, going and getting started, that's probably the right time to go invest in it. Find the right time to invest, pay attention to costs, and don't over engineer are probably sort of three things I would tell someone.
I love it. Yeah, starting
Yep.
simple is one we all need to remember when it comes to data. Thank you so much. It was great to have you on. I love watching Demetrius nerd out about data. And hopefully we'll have you back in a few years to hear about what else is new with FiveX.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much for having me on the show.